Okay, great. So the subject of this webinar is sharing models. And the reason we built these functions we're going to demonstrate today is because we understand that you may want to build your model in TreeAge Pro where you have skills and things are transparent and visual, but you may need to share that model with someone who either doesn't have TreeAge Pro or doesn't know TreeAge Pro well, or just some reason that you want to deliver results to someone who just wants to use them in a familiar Excel format. And that makes sense because not everyone's going to have a TreeAge Pro license, but most people are going to have an Excel installed in their computer and licensed. So the two techniques we're going to show today are just a mechanism to allow you to say, okay, I got my TreeAge Pro model, it's all working. I want to deliver something to someone who doesn't have TreeAge Pro, something that's easy for them to digest. So in order to demonstrate that, we're going to use this example model, the Markov conversion model, which is in the files view. It used to be called projects view, example models, healthcare, and it's this one right here, Markov conversion model. I just used this to test the conversion. There's nothing special about this model. It's just the one I know very well. So we're going to use this model, and we'll just take a brief moment to take a look at the at the structure at this model, so we know what we're going to get on the backside. It's just a standard cancer progression model. We use this a lot for training with 3 states: local cancer, metastases, and dead. And then you have background mortality events, and then you have progression and cancer death events out here and here. Nothing special about this model. It's just a standard Markov model. The second strategy is a clone of the first, so they use the same structure. But you can see here, if we look in the details, there's a few of the parameters that are different. These 3 parameters are different for treatment 1 versus treatment 2. So there is actually a difference between the strategies, even though they use the same structure. So we're not here to talk about this model. Hopefully you all have seen these Markov models. We're talking about how to export these. So there's 2 mechanisms, and the first one we're going to do is the export model scenarios to Excel. So I'm going to select the root node, and I'm going to go to File, Import, Export, and this export model scenarios to Excel. And if I run this function, you see I've already picked these parameters, but you can pick any parameters you want. I can add more over here or bring them back. I can move them up and down however I want, to arrange them in a certain order. But basically what we're doing is we're saying I want the export results to allow the person who receives them to play with values for these particular parameters. And these we're going to leave fixed. So you can add as many of these as you want, but the more that you add here, the more calculations you have to do. So if I add metastases to the bottom here, now it's more calculations. So I'm just going to bring that back. So what it's going to do is it's going to set 3 values for each of these parameters and then calculate under every combination of those parameter values that exists. 3 to the whatever 7th. That's 2187. So now that I've picked the parameters, I go to the next step, and now it says pick the low, best, and high values for each of those parameters. And I'm just going to use the ones that I've already entered, but you could change them any way you want. It will default from the sensitivity analysis ranges, but then you can change them as need be. I click Next. And now it says, okay, is this expected value, cohort analysis, or microsimulation? So I want to make a point here that even if it were a complex simulation model, I could just choose this option and run, let's say, 10,000 patients through, and that would be fine. So it doesn't really matter what kind of model you choose. It could be a discrete event simulation model, a Markov simulation model, or just a cohort model. You can still use this function. Now, this is just a straight. Now, obviously, it's going to take a little longer if you have to run patient simulation. So this is a cohort model, so I'm going to choose that. You provide the willingness to pay. This defaults from the tree preferences. I click Next. And now it gives a little bit of the option to add a little bit of detail in terms of what you want the receiver to see. Because if you just send them a bunch of figures, they may not know what this model is. So it just gives you the ability to add a short model description and then maybe a description for each of the strategies. And if there were more strategies, it'd be more entries. And then you also have the option to either include or not include a picture of the tree, a picture of this format in the model. And I'm going to leave all the defaults and click Finish. And now what it's doing is it's calculating those a little bit more than 2,000 calculations, and it's now generated an Excel output that I'm going to open. And I do need to enable the content because there are macros behind this. So I'm allowing the macros to run. And let's just go back to the overview. And now what we have is an export of a whole bunch of different pre-calculated results under different data scenarios. So we'll start with the overview, but where we really want to focus is on this run model. So the overview is just the descriptions that we added and that last step. So you'd have this for the receiver, this model, to understand what the model is. It details on each strategies, some instructions on how to run this, and because I checked that box, a picture of the tree so they can follow the patient pathways. This is just a picture. It's not a working model, but it's useful for someone to understand what those patient pathways are. The bulk of the work we would do is in the run model, which I'll come back to, but this allows us to run the model. But out here, we just have the base case results. So if we left all the parameters at their best estimate, these are the results that come out of the model: the cost for each strategy, incremental cost, effectiveness for each strategy, incremental effectiveness, ICER. So the ICER and the net monetary benefits, which this one's bigger, so treatment 2 is the optimal strategy. Of course, you also know that because the ICER is less than the willingness to pay. So this is a fixed sheet. We include a fixed version of the base case results, but we can also go back to the run model, and here's where you can change the inputs to look at the model with different scenarios. So for example, I could change this to 25,000, and I could change this to 2.5% and run the model again. And now it generates, or it uses the pre-generated results to generate a new cost effectiveness analysis with the different set or the different scenario reflecting the different parameters that I selected here. And under this second set of scenarios, or second scenario, I have a different ICER. And treatment 2 is still the most cost-effective one, but the ICER has gone down based on the changes I have. And if I wanted to save this as an important scenario that I wanted to look at later, I could just save it on a new sheet. And now this is a fixed sheet. It's locked because I said I wanted to keep a picture of the outputs based on the inputs that I've provided. And you could do this anytime, as much as you want. You could change as many of these inputs as you want, and you can also always return back to the base case. So it's just a nice way to just give someone a real simple export that they can use to look at the model under different scenarios without having to learn TreeAge Pro or buy a license or any of that. Just, okay, give me the results. And that's, I think, a pretty nice tool for sharing models. Seems like a good time to wait for questions. So I'm just going to check the chat. I don't see any questions yet. So since there are no questions, I'll continue on to the second option that we have to export results. So I'm going to go back to TreeAge Pro. Oh, I do have a question. Hold on. The question is, does Excel actually run anything here, or does TreeAge handle all that? TreeAge Pro has generated the results, has pre-generated the results for every combination of three options for each of these three, and these three, etc. So there's 7 of these. So 3 raised to the 7 power, a little bit more than 2,000 calculations have been pre-run in TreeAge Pro. But in Excel, you can look at any combination of those parameter values to see how the results come out. So this isn't for everyone. You're not going to submit this to an HTA body where they're going to want to look at the individual result of the calculations within the model. But for someone who just wants to know the results and wants to look at it under different scenarios, this is a very easy to use, simple tool. Thank you for that question. So now we'll move on to the second way that you can export models, which is more functional but has some limitations. So I'm going to go back to TreeAge Pro. I'm going to use the same model, but I'm going to run a different export. File, import, export, convert to Excel model. And these options are also available here and here. So there's some options, but I'll just leave them with the defaults. And now what this is doing is this has actually generated a working model with the calculations built into the Excel sheet. So it's different from what we did before. Again, I have to enable the macros. But now we have a more fully functional Excel export. And I'm going to skip forward. This is the total results, but I'm going to skip to here first. These are the inputs you can change. And anytime you change one of these inputs, all the data is recalculated. All the results are recalculated. The calculations are actually here and here for each strategy. And if we wanted to look a little bit deeper at the calculations, we could go in and look in, let's say, for example, cell V8 here, right here. So this is the first cycle, the percentage of people who progressed. And how is it calculated? Well, it's calculated based on the percentage that survived background mortality, T8, here, multiplied by the input, P local to METS 1, which is back here. I guess I didn't make that an edit. Oh, here it is. P local to METS 1, 15%. So if I go back here, how did we get this 14.9%? It was the 15% that's an input multiplied by the people who reached that point in the node. So that's following directly the calculations that would occur in the model. So many people are going to survive background mortality. This probability is 15%. That's who's going to go there. And so that's how this is going to work. All the calculations that TreeAge Pro needs to do cohort analysis have been regenerated here. And it's not just the percentage of the cohort flow through the model. If I jump out to Z8 right here, Z8, this is the cost of progression, which was in the model, right? This is a $1,000 cost, which is only applied to the people who progress. So back in Excel, that C progression is the $1,000 input parameter multiplied by V8, which was the percentage of the cohort that progressed that we looked at before. So you can see all the calculations here, full transparency, a summary back here of what happened to the cohort and the pay and the values that are being accumulated by cycle, and then down at the bottom, the total cost, total effectiveness. My 3 extra outcomes that I've measured, they're just counters, and those 397,000 and 10.0 or 10.10 go back into the model results here that generate the ICER, that same 32,653 that we saw as the base case in the other export. So the primary difference between these two options is the first one we looked at is just an export of results, and it's a little simpler because a lot of stuff you don't need there. It's just kind of showing you how to look at results under different scenarios. Whereas this Markov to Excel conversion is really a fully functioning Markov model that actually contains all the calculations. And if you wanted to use it as the basis of an HTA submission, you could put your own skins on top of it in any way that you want to reformat it, because you have all the calculations built in. So that's really. I'll take questions in a second, but I just wanted to kind of finish up that the goal behind these features are trying to give you the ability to build models in TreeAge Pro, even if you need to deliver them in an Excel format. Whether you just want a simple way of presenting results through that first option of exporting model scenarios, or a more complex worksheet that includes all the Markov cohort calculations. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm just going to go and I know that a few questions came in, so let's just take them in order. Okay. There was quite a few questions, so I'm just trying to make sure I get them all. So hold on a second. So the first question was about whether I already answered that one. The question is, can the user use the specific values entered or values in between available? At this point, we're specifying the 3 values on that first export. It's not just like a continuous, because those results are pre-calculated. We may expand that to allow you to enter more than just the 3, but this is the first iteration of this with a low, best, and high value for each one. But since the values are recalculated, if we allowed you to enter like 20 values for any one of those, that would be another 20 times as many calculations. So for now, it's just 3 per, but we certainly could look to expand that. Now, another question. So somebody asked, I'm glad someone asked this, Kate specifically. You should, if you have a non-student license for TreeAge Pro Healthcare, you should have access to both of those Excel export functions. They are part of a separate module that at some point could be sold separately. But as of now, we're providing free access to that. So you probably just need to go into your license manager and refresh your license with the internet authorization, because at the end of the year, we extended it from all of 2018 to all of 2019. So if you refresh your license information through internet authorization, it should reactivate those functions. There was another question. Can the model run microsimulation? The first one with the exported results can handle microsimulation models. This one that has cohort analysis built into it cannot, because it's just a cohort analysis run. So yes for the first one, no for the second one. Are there any further questions that someone wants to ask before we close? I guess not. So I think we'll close up for the day. I want to thank you all for joining me. Please check treeage.com/webinars for a recording of this webinar and future webinars, which we try to do once a month. I appreciate all your time and have a great day.